Okay. All right, we'll call to order the Minturn Town Council meeting of April 17th, 2024. Roll call, please.
Here. Dusty here.
Kate here.
Eric here.
Earl here. Online,
Mine's there.
Ryan's there. And Lynn, you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's stand and put the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, which only has our last meeting's minutes. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion by Kate, second by Gusty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have approval of the regular agenda. Do we have any amendments or deletions?
I'll make a motion to approve the regular agenda as presented. I'll second.
Motion by Gusty, second by Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Does any board member have a conflict of interest on any item of the agenda today?
No.
Hearing none, I'll take a motion. Moving on, public comment. This time of the meeting where we take comments from the public on any issue they have with the council, with the exception of items on the agenda. Jay, you got anybody out there?
Excuse me, we do not.
Say what?
No, we do not.
Do we have phone speakers? That sounds like it.
Jay, just so you know, you sound very muffled on this end, just so you know.
Okay, I will try to speak less and clearly.
So that's a no. Okay. Next item we have is council comments and or committee reports. Tom, you got anything? Very good. Dusty?
Yeah, I do on see, April 19th got to attend April 9th, got to attend my first Minturn Fitness Center board meeting, and I was very impressed. We went over the budget for next year. The budget runs pretty much May 1st through April 30th. So it's for 24-25. On track for a positive outcome financially, which is good news. There won't be any rate increase for Minturn residents, but there's going to be a 10% rate increase for non-Minturn residents. That's about all I have out of it. I was pretty impressed with the way the meeting was run.
Great. Good to hear this. Okay, okay.
I do not.
A couple things. So we'll start Housing Authority Board meeting. That was, it was excellent. We've got some exciting projects underway down Valley. So they're doing great work over there. I'm excited to be seeing what comes of it. Also attended High Five Media Board. That was also excellent. Got to meet the team and everybody that's over there. One of the big projects underway is to hopefully digitize a lot of the older archive footage and extra footage. So part of that is working with the library district and hopefully housing some of that material there, as well as getting that available for future use. So that will require some grant funding possibly, and more to come on that. And then last but not least, Climate Action Collaborative Board meeting. Been to a couple meetings with them now since, or the last couple weeks here, and they are probably biggest takeaway is they are in need of more funding. So they're working on some additional plans for that going forward, but those guys are always doing great and wonderful things for all of us. So very important topic that we'll keep an eye on. But
Okay.
that's it.
Eric did all the committees.
Yeah.
I know, right? That's why it makes the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly.
But it carried the load.
Brian, you got anything? Guess I'll take that as a no. Lynn, do you have any comment?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, well, both Brian and I were out of town and out of pocket to Zoom in. So, but Michelle filled in for us. You wanna give us a EDTA? Actually, it's on your management report in it. So we'll go through that when you get to that.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Which is next?
Well, wonderful. I'm happy to provide an update on the Eagle Valley Transit Authority, which continues to move along at a rapid pace for the timing with their complete transition from Eco Transit to the Eagle Valley Transit Authority. It's an amazing process that they've gone through, and it's encouraging to see this work being done. One of the biggest takeaways from that is that they are under a tight deadline, and they will be increasing their meetings. So for those folks who like to watch the Eagle Valley Transit Authority meetings or possibly participate through public comments, the meetings will start to take place every 2 weeks virtually. And so those virtual links will be made available on their website for anybody who might be interested. In addition to that, I just have a few quick things. I've been keeping you updated on the Railroad Avenue improvements. We're going to be with the CDOT grant, which I addressed with CDOT regarding the need for the Public Utilities Commission approval. CDOT seemed relatively acknowledging of that need. So that was encouraging. And I actually had a great meeting with the Public Utilities Commission representative today. So I will start that application process for approval to put pedestrian improvements across the already paved railroad tracks. But those pedestrian improvements will go from the southernmost end of Minturn Road to essentially Bellem Bridge. So that'll be a great addition.
Do you know how long how long it will take to get the approvals?
No. So the question was, how long will it take to get approvals from the Public Utilities Commission? And I do not know, but I anticipate our application is somewhat fast-tracked given its simplicity. So that's fingers crossed. In addition to that, in the next few days, folks should hopefully be seeing these on their door fronts, doorknobs. This is for the Minturn Community Survey. So email blasts have gone out about this. Text messages for those who have their cell phone numbers connected to their voter registration. Newsletter updates have gone out about this, and there was a press release in the Vail Daily. So for anyone saying they haven't heard about this,
This is for them.
I struggle. So we really encourage everyone to take the community survey at your earliest possible convenience. It closes on April 24th. And then in addition, the Minturn Bike Park is getting ready for another amazing summer season. We partner with Vail Valley Mountain Trails Alliance with this, and it's been a great opportunity to bring bicycling to our community. There are several opportunity dates for volunteering, and so we hope people will sign up for that. Lastly, Cindy Creek is coordinating highway cleanup day, which traditionally has been very hard for her to get Minturn residents to sign up to help clean up the highway. I think so far this year we have 2 Minturn residents, which is twice as many as usual. So we are hopeful that some Minturn residents will sign up for the May 4th highway cleanup day. Contact Cindy Krieg at events@minturn.org if anyone is interested. Thank you.
Maybe you should get some door hangers for that too.
We have a running tally on response numbers so far for the survey.
You know, I got an update today. I think we're at 139-ish. So we would absolutely love to get above 200. So we really need to start seeing some more come in. Everybody's voice is important.
And just for anybody listening or streaming later, it's really important that that community survey is important for the council to receive guidance from our citizens. As far as where the priorities lie for us to address and how they want us to address it. So it really only takes about 5 minutes to go through that. So if you could just get online, if you're not an online person, which you probably are, if you're hearing this, but you can always go to the office and they'll give you a printout and you can fill it out manually. So please do give us some guidance. Okay, next we have special presentations. We have Castle Peak Senior Life and Rehab updates from Shelley Cornish. Welcome.
I assume I'm going here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, hi, thank you. I'm Shelley Cornish. I'm the Executive Director of Castle Peak Senior Life and Rehabilitation in Eagle, Colorado. And we're just, I'm going around from town to town, just sort of giving updates. We haven't talked about Castle Peak for a while, and your town was very generous back in the day when we got built. So just giving updates to everybody. So thank you for having me. There is a presentation over there that we'll be following along with. So since the very beginning, Castle Peak, the vision of Castle Peak was really to provide essential senior care and living services to all who need for our communities in our valley. And this vision was born out of the generosity of local donors, towns like yourself and businesses, and we're grateful for all of your help with doing that. As the only senior living community in Eagle and Summit County, so really all the way from Denver to here, we're the first senior living community. So we really are an essential service for our valley, for sure, for us to have a well-rounded community from, you know, childcare all the way to as you get older. So with that, we serve about 140 people every year since the 2016 is when we opened our doors. So 140 people in this valley every year. So you add that up over 8 years, that's quite a few people that we've been able to serve. And the experience and generosity and insights of our older generation make our community whole. And Castle Peak is a critical resource for these lifelong residents here. So just a little bit about the kind of quality of care that we provide. We're going to talk about a nationally recognized award that we received this year. So we contract with a company called Pinnacle that does customer satisfaction surveys, and it goes across the nation. And what we received this year, along with last year, but different areas, this year means that we're in the top 15% of all senior cares within the nation for the following. So overall satisfaction, quality of food, cleanliness, individual needs, laundry service, dignity and respect, and professional therapy services. So we're pretty proud of that award. Castle Peak is a nonprofit, and so we do offer or accept a lot of different payer types that could come to us. And so I've just put a screen up here. So about 60% of the people that we serve are on Medicaid as their payer source, which is a government funded program. A little less than 30% are private pay, and about 10% are Medicare. So the Medicare really, so in our skilled nursing facility, we have 44 private beds or private room for people. So we serve 44 people. And then our assisted living, we have 20 apartments. And really the Medicare pays for more of that rehab section. So where people have like a knee replacement or hip surgery and they come to us with some pretty intense therapy needs. They typically stay about 16 days. I think that's our average length of stay for that program. The rest of them are much longer, but that's what Medicare pays for. So the next slide shows kind of, if you look at the blue line, that's Castle Peak's occupancy. And if the orange line is the state average, and this is for skilled nursing. So you could see Castle Peak operates at a very high occupancy rate compared to the average around the state, which again, I just think really shows the need for Castle Peak services here in our valley. So the state average is a little less than 80% occupied in their buildings, and we're operating a little more than 90%. So it's pretty busy there all the time. And then in our assisted living, if you flip to the next slide, you can also see in our assisted living kind of over the years, I don't have a state benchmark, I couldn't get that data. But you can see that our occupancy is about 95% almost always. So really, really strong occupancy with really strong wait list as well, so. With that though, there are, while the need is really great in our valley to have this service, it does come with some challenges to run a building like this, as we all probably know. The rising cost of living, the lack of affordable housing, the things that we hear all the time, right, in our valley, and the workforce crisis have immensely increased the cost of providing this care in Eagle County. Government reimbursement programs have not really kept pace with the cost that it takes to care for people in this region. And if you guys remember back a few slides, 60% of our people are on that payer source. And so there's a gap of $150 to $200 per day per resident. So it's a significant gap. Fortunately, we have found some short-term solutions to that and some partners that help us to provide these cares to older adults, and so that we can continue to serve everybody in this valley, which is really our goal, is to be able to serve anybody that needs the care. So some of the solutions, we're always looking at operational efficiencies, of course, increasing occupancy. However, there's not a whole lot of room there. We're pretty full, and reducing some of our pool labor, which is like the contracted CNAs or nurses that come in. I will say that last summer we had a pretty high number of them, and I'm down to filling 2 positions right now. So that's really come a long way. So pretty proud of that. Eagle County, as you've maybe heard, has chosen to invest in supporting this important service in the valley for the last couple of years. And while this level of support does not cover the entire operating gap at Castle Peak, it sure does close the gap. So it does bring us within reach in regards to the work, so that we can continue our work at Castle Peak. We do always seek for other charitable support. We have many private donors and those types of things as well. And while the operating environment is challenging, we remain pretty encouraged by the mission of Castle Peak and committed community members that are engaged in finding ways to support this important service that we provide. So we just keep plugging along and try and find solutions. So, and I wanted to share a quick little, a quick little story about one of our residents that lives there. Her name is Christine, and she and her husband is Gary. So they have been lifelong members of this valley, and they've had their careers here. They've made this their home, and they met 41 years ago. They've been married, and about 13 years ago, Chris had a pretty significant health change, and so with that, her brain started to swell, and so with that, she needed 24-hour care. And her husband, who lives in this valley, he was able to care for her for 3 years on his own, which is outstanding. And I don't know how much you guys know about caregiving, but that is no easy task to do full time. It came to a point where he couldn't sustain it anymore, and so he really thought that he would have to go someplace to find care for her, and insert Castle Peak. But he didn't know that he could really afford it. And so he thought he would have to go down to Denver. It's the closest spot he could find. And how the story turns out, we do accept Medicaid, right? So we've talked about that. So he was able to get her placed at Castle Peak. He only lives 10 minutes from there. And so now he's able to visit every single day. He comes and visits, and although she can't speak anymore, they have a connection that I wish I could show you guys. It's something you just have to see, but they're able to communicate back and forth. And without Castle Peak, you really would not be able to have that. And so that's kind of my story about the value that we provide to the people that have literally made this their home. They've given everything to this valley to be able to live here. And so I'm glad that we're able to support them in their older years. So with that, that's my presentation. Thank you again for taking time to just hear an update on Castle Peak. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
one thing for sure is congratulations for the job that you and your staff have done over the years. Because I can remember when we were trying to get the donations needed from the municipalities and other jurisdictions to make it happen. And with the difficulties that seems senior care across the country is having, to be able to pull that off in this small community is deserves your congratulations on that. So do you have a long-term strategy or do you need to start visiting for more donations from jurisdictions, or is there other strategies that you have besides that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our strategy is to continue the work. And that is obviously all the things that we talked about, trying to improve some of our operational efficiencies, those kinds of things, but also it's going to take support from our community. So whether that be from Eagle County, whether that be from private donors, yes, we'll have to continue to ask for that support. Yeah. So.
Any other questions from the board?
Based on, I think 4.8% occupancy rate, what's the current ratio of medical staff to
Oh,
residents? And
yeah, we employ about 80 people.
so on the floor at any given time?
Oh, at any given time.
But
So it depends on the program that you're talking about. So in our health center, it's a higher level of care, so that requires more staffing. The assisted living is less. That's more like apartment living, senior
Right.
apartments. In the health center, our average staffing is actually higher than the national average. So we're 2 floors. It's hard to explain until you see the building, but there's 2 floors. On each floor, there's about 21 to 23 people on both floors that we care for. With that, we have about, oh, that's hard to answer. Two nurses, 2 CNAs, plus a nurse manager. So I don't know if that gives you, it's about 1 to 7 ratio, if that's helpful.
is that ultimately working for you based on the pool issue? And I guess where I'm driving at is obviously your fundraising aspect as far as actual staffing objective. You said you're too short.
I have 2 to hire, yes. I mean, we have them filled with pool staff, but yes, 2 more to hire. Yeah,
There's no changes to staffing projections for the following year.
no.
All I got.
So are you thinking of trying to go and build more occupancy, or do y'all have a in-home assisted living staff that does that kind of thing?
So in our assisted living, we have 20 apartments there, and there are staff that work there as well, 24/7.
Mhm.
So they're able to provide kind of customized services, so you don't just get, it's not all inclusive there. So if like a resident moves in and they just need someone to help them with their medications, then that's what they pay for. If they need medications plus help and assistance with bathing, which is the highest fall risk because it's slippery surface, then they can just purchase that service. So that's kind of how that works in the assisted living. It's kind of like an in-home home care, I guess, in a way.
Any other questions from anyone?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thanks for offering this service. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we do.
Well, thank you for coming in to see us,
Yeah.
and let's keep up the communication.
Sounds good.
And we do have a budget process that's in the fall, so if you have something that you're rolling out as far as fundraising, just let us know.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Okay. Now we're off to business items. The first item is ordinance number 4, series 2024, second reading. An ordinance amending chapter 19 of the Historic Preservation Code to allow for noticing of demolition prior to permitting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the last council meeting, the council by staff request continued this item so we could ensure the accurate content of the ordinance was being presented. So tonight in your packet, you have the updated ordinance from the request at the first reading to allow for up to 365 days for unnecessary ability to extend a permit. So this ordinance is to help streamline the process for those who may be interested in demolishing what could potentially be nominated as a historic structure. And it allows those applicants to find out ahead of time before going through the entire demolition permitting process to find out if it's even going to potentially be nominated first. So we're continuing to try to streamline the historic preservation policies that we have in place, knowing, that it was new and that it would be a fluid document. So at the last, at 2 council meetings ago, it was requested that staff have the ability to extend the permit that would be issued from 180 days up to a full 365 days. That has been added as subsection 7D in the ordinance. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. This is for second reading.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, Tom, anything?
Nope.
Dusty?
I don't have anything either.
Eric?
Thanks for the changes.
Brian? Brian, are you there?
I don't know if he can hear you.
Try.
Brian, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I took out my headphones. Apparently those are broken. Sorry about that earlier. No questions.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
I have no questions.
So, so you did have did you add the subsection D? Was that an addition from the first reading?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, since this is an ordinance, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone on the public like to address council on this subject? Got anybody, Jay?
No, sir.
Nope.
I think that was a no. Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing. And if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 04 series 2024, amending chapter 19, article 9 of the Minturn Municipal Code.
All second.
Motion by Tom, second by Eric. Roll call, please.
Tom, I.
Dusty, I.
Yeah.
Eric, I.
Roll aye.
Brian, I.
Lynn, I.
We have an ordinance. Next item on the agenda is resolution 15 series 2024. A resolution approving the Bellum Bridge feasibility professional service agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as we have been discussing over the last year plus, the need for addressing issues on Bellum Bridge continue. So with that, a pretty thorough memo was in your packet outlining Minturn's need to evaluate Bellum Bridge to a greater extent to understand if it is most efficient for the town to repair the bridge, not just the repairs required by the state, but the holistic repairs that should be done to the bridge, or if in fact the cost to repair the bridge may be so close to the cost to replace the bridge, is that a better use of the funds? So what Jeff Spinell and I have done, really Jeff Spinell, who is on the line, we're very thankful for him, is we have taken this out to a request for proposals so that we could find a firm to help with this feasibility study. It was noticed as per our procurement policy. We received 3 proposals back. We interviewed all 3 firms, and honestly, all 3 firms could have done the job. I mean, we were fortunate that they were all well qualified. Jeff Spinell and I both felt that SEH was the firm that was able to provide the service in the most efficient amount of time at the most reasonable price. As you saw, the 3 proposals that came in, SEH was in the middle at just about $70,000. SEH was the one firm that was able to complete this project by August of this year. The 2 other firms are not able to complete the project until December. The August completion date allows us to try to go for the fall grant cycle, was what we were thinking timing wise. So with that, there's a lot of information in your packet pertaining to the complications of Bellum Bridge. So I did ask Jeff Spinell to be here tonight in case anyone has questions about Bellum Bridge engineering itself. Jeff, do you want to add to any part of that?
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my camera won't turn on, I'm sorry. No, I don't have anything to add. The memo is pretty self-explanatory, and if you looked at the proposal, it's even more in depth of what would be included.
Jeff, I have a quick question. There was one item, repair item on here that had priority of it that should be taken care of in 90 days unless I misread that. Are you familiar with that?
He is.
Absolutely.
Could you-
Yeah. When that came, Michelle, was that a year ago that we got
Yes.
that? Okay.
2022, actually.
Yeah, yeah, I talked to the state, to CDOT, who did the inspection, and actually went further than that and talked to the subcontract engineer that did it. And CDOT reduced the requirement. We have been monitoring Bellem Bridge to see if it's moving. And there's been no significant movement of the bridge in the 2 or 3 years we've been monitoring it now. And when they saw the monitoring results, they told us to continue to monitor it and notify them if it moved, but that in the meantime, that we could move forward with taking care of this when funds allowed. And so that's why we went to the proposal. When we got the 90-day notice, we did engage SEH at that time to give us an emergency repair. And frankly, the extent of the emergency repair to fix the scour was such that in discussing with Michelle, we just felt like that was going to be so extensive. We really needed to consider doing the whole thing at the same time, because I went out there myself and crawled underneath the bridge and looked at the superstructure and stuff. And we've got rust and cracks and so forth that need to be addressed. So as long as the state was comfortable that it was a stable bridge, then we decided to take the time to get this RFP underway.
So the 90-day repair requirement isn't really.
They waived it, yes,
That's
yeah.
correct.
I think it was a knee-jerk reaction. And what happens is CDOT hires different engineering firms to do this. And the engineer that did the 22 inspection was not the same firm that did the 2020 inspection. And my conversation with the engineer was, it hasn't visually changed that much. And when I sent her the results of the monitoring, she said, well, you are complying with one of the requirements of the CDOT letter, which is to monitor it. And so you're good to go to continue monitoring.
So Jeff, there's a lot of pictures here. Could you I don't know which one is concerning that repair.
There's a, and I am not seeing anything on the screen, but there's an engineering drawing in there that is redlined.
Mhm.
You'll see the red marks on the drawing.
Those are all spark.
Michelle, maybe you can point them to it, because
We get past the pictures here.
I believe he's referencing page. Jeff, are you referencing page 68 of the packet?
Michelle, I can't see the packet, so I don't know.
Yes.
But it's an as-built drawing of the bridge that's been marked up
Okay,
in
that's-
red with the emergency repairs. It's a couple of sheets.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, and you can see the extent and what that entails is digging out the bottom of the river. And then getting underneath there we go. It's digging out the bottom of the river to the extent of the red marks on there. then getting underneath each of the piers and the abutment for the bridge and grouting there's been erosion, particularly in the middle of the river with the piers that support the middle of the bridge. And so the emergency repair was going to be to grout between, just extend the bottom of the footing down to solid material and then replace that entire red area with cobbles and large boulders to protect it from further scouring.
And you feel, I assume you'll continue the regular inspections, there's nothing that's, if you start seeing it move, that we can't get it taken care of in time before it fails. Is that correct?
It depends, I'm not a structural engineer.
Okay.
But from my discussions with SEH, who are structural engineers, we just need to watch it, and especially in the high runoff time when there'd be a lot of scour going on. But it just doesn't appear that, it's moving. It seems to still be solid, but we do need to pay attention to it. And what would happen if we started seeing movement in the bridge is in talking to CDOT, is they would either put a load limit on that bridge or close it, depending on the extent of the movement.
Okay.
And we have a surveyor going out there once a month, and we've got permanent monitoring points on the bridge so that they're taking measurements in the same place every time they go out there. And like I say, there's not been any significant movement in 2 years.
Okay.
So yes, it's a concern, but I don't think, knock on wood, I don't think we're concerned about, and CDOT certainly has not indicated to me that they're worried about an immediate collapse.
Okay, so is there anything else, any other questions from the board on this?
Two obvious questions. All phases, or which phases would require the closure of the bridge? And then I assume the North Bridge and Minturn Road are the only routes to and fro for North Minturn.
When you say phases, are you talking about whether it's reconstruction or rehabilitation?
Reconstruction, that's pretty much a given, but I guess rehabilitation based on the scouring, the red line repair, etc. I would assume no load on the bridge during work.
We'll have to, work through that detail, but it's possible that the bridge could be reduced to one lane while that work is going on, but we'll just have to see how extensive the repairs are going to be. But it's possible it would have to be closed during the repairs. There will be some, at least short-term closures while the steel's being worked on underneath and stuff.
And then the grant cycle or funding cycle, since August is what we were shooting for, is what?
Yes.
Traditionally, CDOT has what's called an off-bridge program. And they traditionally have grants that open up later that fall, like October, November-ish, which is why we wanted to have this work complete, the feasibility study complete, because that would be necessary in order to apply for any grant opportunities.
And that program generally is a rapid turnaround from approval to distribution of funds.
No, it's a CDOT program.
So best case scenario, we shoot for this time next year, based on an August conclusion of the study and the grant cycle and winter.
If miracles happen.
They
But
do. They do.
They
Michelle.
do, and I
sitting
shouldn't be
here.
so, I shouldn't be so down on CDOT because they are working very hard on their contracting, which is what can take so long. But as an example, our sidewalk project was a year delayed due to CDOT contracting process. So our goal would absolutely be for grant and then construction that next spring. That's incredibly hopeful, but I will ride your optimism.
And SEH also has consulting capabilities as well as far as finding money.
You know, they do, however, we have a far better opportunity to go through Sustainable Strategies, who is our grant writing firm
Okay.
that we already utilize.
Okay.
Yeah, their proposal does include pointing us to grant sources that they're familiar with. So, and we've already talked to them briefly about it, and CDOT was the major, in fact, all three firms that we talked to pointed to the CDOT program.
The off-system bridge program.
Correct.
Okay, there's nothing more. We move forward with a motion on resolution 15.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 15, series 2024. A resolution to approve a feasibility study on Bellum Bridge conducted by Short Elliott Hendrickson's SEH Incorporated for the town of Minturn, and authorizing the manager of the town of Minturn to sign the agreement.
Kate seconds.
Okay, motion by Gusty, second by Kate. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have ordinance number 5, series 2224, first reading, an ordinance approving the Battle North Bolts Lake Development Agreement.
I'll take this one, Mr. Mayor. So we have two items on the agenda tonight that are part of the implementation of the settlement agreement with Battle Mountain that we entered into last fall. The development invested property rights agreement is one part of that, and then the next item on the agenda, which is a consideration of metropolitan districts within the town, is the next portion. In looking at the participants on Zoom as well as in the audience, it appears everybody here is either town related or Battle Mountain related. I don't see any members of the public, and I want to use our time as efficiently as possible, but am happy to go into as much detail as the council would like about the proposed agreement. I prepared a fairly detailed staff memo. I thought I could kind of walk quickly through that. And then we have Tim McGuire with us from Battle Mountain. We also have Lindsay Lyda, who is part of the legal team for Battle Mountain, who did a lot of the drafting on this document. And so we would provide them with an opportunity to chime in, and then take council questions and receive comments. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, this document is expressly contemplated in the settlement agreement with Battle Mountain, that there would be a development invested property rights agreement. And we'll talk about vested property rights and why they are very important to the landowner in this situation. But the settlement agreement specifically says there's going to be this document, and it's going to say certain things in order to enable vested rights to be created. As I think everybody here is familiar with the history, at least at a 30,000 foot level, starting in 2006 and then in 2008, the town entered into a number of agreements and land use approvals for a ambitious development concept involving a private ski area and large number of lots and big hotel. That never came to fruition, and in 2012, there was a subsequent agreement between the landowner and the town to deal with millions of dollars that had been put into escrow as part of the 2008 agreements, and how that money was going to be allocated and released both to the town and to Battle Mountain. The ordinance that accompanies the Bolts Lake Development Invested Property Rights Agreement specifically terminates all of those previous agreements. And that is in furtherance of the, and governmental approvals that had been made. That is in furtherance of the settlement goal to kind of wipe the slate clean and to move forward with the Bolts Lake concept. Everybody except Tom was on council when the zoning for the Bolts Lake concept came before you about, I believe, about 6 weeks ago. So you'll remember kind of the 250 units, 50,000 square feet of commercial, lots of open space. And we implemented that through an ordinance, again, about 6 weeks ago. This ordinance, as well as all other or most other approvals that we're working our way through to implement the battle settlement, it is contingent upon the closing of the settlement, which means if for some reason a provision in the settlement agreement could not be implemented, and that includes this council's exercise of its discretion in making approvals, which you are not bound to vote one way or the other for this ordinance or any other request coming to you related to Battle Mountain. But if for some reason we were unable to bring all of the components of the settlement together, this ordinance vacating the prior approvals and agreements would not be effective, and the town and Battle Mountain would reserve their rights to go back to litigation and make their arguments in front of the court based upon the agreements from the prior iteration of the development. The development agreement does two main things. One is it memorializes some promises that Battle Mountain made to the town that need to be implemented through an agreement. And second of all, it creates this concept of vested rights, which provides the landowner with a guarantee that they have a defined period of time in which to implement their approvals without the rules being changed on them. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this. Section 2.1 implements or is part of the implementation of the zoning for the property. I would highlight a couple of items that we're dealing with in the settlement agreement that pertain to the zoning that was previously approved. One is the town has a watershed protection plan. It provides for setbacks from rivers and creeks that are up gradient from where the town takes its water. Some small portion of Battle's property is in fact above where the town has decreed water rights and currently does take its water for treatment. So the watershed protection plan comes into place. There is a map attached to the watershed protection ordinance, which is very vague as it pertains to Cross Creek. Very hard to discern exactly where its geographic limits are as to the Battle Mountain property. So this document includes a provision that says that our presumptive setback for watershed protection purposes on Battle's property will be 30 feet from the ordinary high water mark. So not from the center line of the creek, but actually up the slope a little bit. And that is consistent with the town zoning code, which we use throughout the town to preserve riparian areas and protect our rivers. So that's one implementation item that we're dealing with. The other one, the section 2.1C talks about infrastructure that will serve more than just Battle Mountain. And in particular, this relates to Molloy Park Road and probably a sewer trunk line that would go up Molloy Park Road. There is one other large landowner up there, the school district, which will be utilizing those facilities as well. And section 2.1C essentially says that the town will do its best to try and negotiate some cost sharing as to those infrastructure improvements at the time that Battle Mountain makes them. Section 2.2, again, kind of relates to the zoning for the property. Section 2.3 identifies an exception for Malloy Park Road and associated development paths and ownership of roads. What we have negotiated with Battle Mountain is that pretty much with the exception of Malloy Park Road, the town will not be responsible for any of the infrastructure associated with the Bolts Lake development. And that is because, number one, ERWSD is the owner of the sewer lines that will service the property. Number two, ERWSD in conjunction with potential metropolitan districts will own and operate a water treatment plant and all of the water service lines serving the Bolts Lake area. And number three, that roads, sidewalks, pocket parks that would be eventually approved through further subdivision applications in the Bolts Lake area will be owned and maintained by metropolitan districts. And so what this means is that the town has really limited its financial outlays for future services to this portion of town. It really is Malloy Park Road that we will be looking at having some financial obligations for, because we will eventually take ownership of that roadway. Section 2.4 deals with promises that Battle Mountain has made through the development process. These really were hammered out at the time of the settlement agreement. One involves the Malloy Park wetlands area. That's kind of the large, wide space between the road that goes to our water treatment plant and Malloy Park Road, adjacent to the consolidated tailings pile. There will be a covenant that gets imposed against that property that will restrict development only to infrastructure and passive wintertime recreation. The town is reserving the right to approve what kinds of recreation can occur in this area. And the town, through approval of development plans, will also have a say in the infrastructure that gets put in that area. Another promise that was made was for a fishing easement along Cross Creek, up higher than the wetlands area. That will be put in place. There will be a covenant put in place allowing for that fishing access at the time that Battle Mountain or a successor in interest plats property in that area. We'll deal with that. Section 2.7 deals with water service. This is, of course, very important to the town due to constraints on our own water treatment system and water rights. One of the fundamental concepts of the settlement agreement was that Battle Mountain would take care of its own water needs, and that it wouldn't be done in a haphazard way. Rather, it would require the involvement of ERWSD, who is a known commodity in this area, who has a number of technical experts who are familiar with how to properly design and operate a water treatment system and associated piping. And so section 2.7 provides that the Battle retained property will be served by a separate water treatment plant, which will be operated by ERWSD. Battle Mountain, when they sold the Bolts Lake Reservoir area to ERWSD for future reservoir construction, included provisions that require ERWSD to operate and maintain a plant for them if that ever comes to pass, if it gets built. In terms of ensuring that people who might buy, and it wouldn't be initially platted lots, it would be kind of larger exemption parcels, if those of you who were on council at the time that we approved the zoning, another provision that we approved was creating an exemption plat process where parcels larger than 5 acres could be platted in an expedited way. They would be conveyable parcels, so there is a possibility that Battle could sell one of these parcels to a third party. And in addition to the development agreement itself, putting third parties on notice that we are not providing water to this area. There will be plat notes on the exemption plats as well as on all final subdivision plats, confirming that the town doesn't provide the water service. And in fact, there is a waiver contained in this agreement whereby Battle and its successors in interest waive any right to receive town water and waive any right to disconnect from the town. So that's de-annex from the town because the town doesn't provide them with water service. So we're making sure that this shows up. The fact that the town is not providing water to this property is showing up in a lot of different recorded locations. The agreement confirms some items that we hammered out at the time of settlement related to what the town's purview would be in reviewing future water treatment plant as well as associated infrastructure. And essentially, because the plant will be, I would assume the ERWSD would have design supervision and then they will operate the plant. And all water plants have to be approved by the Colorado Department of Health and Public Health and Environment. Those are entities that understand water plants. The town does not have extensive expertise, especially with modern water plants that they would be considering. So the agreement makes clear that the town does not have regulatory jurisdiction to oversee and approve the technical nature of the water plant that will be built. That will be done by ERWSD and by the state of Colorado. We do retain the right to review location, character, and extent of the water treatment plant building and kind of layout. That's how does it access the road? What's the landscaping look like? What are the parking requirements? What does the building look like? That would come to council for review. But the technical nature of the water treatment plant itself would not. And if we get into a dispute about that, this agreement does have a very limited alternative dispute resolution provision where the question of whether an element of the water system that the town believed it should be reviewing and approving was a technical component or whether it was subject to this location and extent obligation, and that would be resolved by 3 water law technical experts who would be appointed, one by us, one by Battle, and the third one would be appointed by the 2 other experts. I would again note I don't deem or don't view this as very likely in ever being used. I don't think we're going to get into a dispute about who has jurisdiction to kind of review the technical aspects of the water treatment plant. But if we did, it would have this kind of unique dispute resolution mechanism in place. Article 3 deals with the vested rights. And so the development agreement incorporates the ordinance whereby we approved the zoning and some amendments to our utility code to allow for ERWSD to operate a separate water treatment plant, as well as this subdivision exemption process that I briefly touched on. And what the agreement says is we commit not to change our code in a way that materially impacts those code provisions for a period of 30 years. In other words, the developer gets to rely on the language of what was approved in that ordinance for a fairly lengthy period of time as they work to realize the benefit of the land use entitlements that they're getting. 30 years does seem like a really long time, but in light of some of the unique challenges facing this property, including building their own water treatment plant, and then having a reservoir built kind of in the middle of it, 30 years may not be that long of a period of time. And so the 30-year period, it was something that was included in the settlement agreement. But essentially, I just want everybody to understand, we are, by this document, agreeing we will not change the zoning on Battle Mountain at some point in the future, even if citizens show up with pitchforks in this room demanding that we do so. We're committing that we don't do that. And I would tell you, for large developments, an extended vested rights period is fairly common. It's not always 30 years, sometimes it's 15 or 20 or some other number, but vested rights is an important part of a development application in order to ensure that the landowner gets the benefit of the investment they're making and has the surety to know that they can proceed with their development in a reasonable period of time. There are a couple of exceptions to amendments that we've pre-negotiated out with Battle Mountain. One of those is the town intends to modify its affordable housing cap, or the cap on affordable housing, to no lower than 140% of AMI. It's today.
That's correct.
Yeah. And that will be coming to you in a future ordinance, and Scott Hahn, our planner, will be explaining the reasons why we think that's important. We also have the ability to amend the code to implement procedural elements. How do we accept applications? What are the materials that need to be provided? How do we process them? As the council will recall, we went through a very extensive community plan update last year. That community plan contemplates improvements or modifications to the code. Staff is working on those being implemented, and this document, so long as those changes again don't materially affect the substance of the zoning and other provisions that we've approved, they've acknowledged that we have the right to amend the code in that way. And finally, this doesn't prevent the town from adopting updates to technical codes like the building code, the energy use code. Those get updated every 2 to 5 years. We are usually in the mix of getting those newer code versions adopted. Because they're generally applicable, the town has the right to do that, and Battle Mountain and their successors would just have to comply with those technical codes. Article 4 deals with defaults. There's a lot of language in here, and it's a little bit confusing. Well, it deserves some explanation as to why there are provisions in the default and remedies section that may seem a little bit odd. So the goal is to prevent the town from being found liable for monetary damages in the event there is future litigation, whereby a court determines that the town has done something to violate the vested rights of Battle Mountain. And there's a state statute involving vested rights. One of the remedies under that statute is that the town has to pay the diminution in value associated with a violation of vested rights. The town wants to prevent financial liabilities like that. So we agree in this remedy section that really the sole remedy is something called specific performance, and that is Battle Mountain could request the court to evaluate a code change made by the town. If the court determined that that materially affected the vested rights, the court could essentially issue an order saying, Minturn, you have to rescind this provision that violates the vested rights. And we engage, there's a series of waivers back and forth in this language where Battle waives its right to receive monetary compensation. We've waived the right to pay monetary compensation. We agree that specific performance is the only remedy. But then there's a provision that says, if specific performance is for some reason denied by the court, I can't imagine what that would be, but you know, it's kind of this fail-safe provision. Well, then the court could award monetary value or monetary damages. But at that point, the town has the right to do one of two things: either A, rescind the offending ordinance or language that violates the vested rights, or B, pay the damages. I think the odds that that will ever happen are extremely low. I think if some number of councils in the future from you were to do something that infringed on the vested rights, probably that would get resolved before litigation was filed, and if not, the court would just simply issue an order saying you have this obligation not to impinge on the vested rights, remove the offending language in your code. The development agreement is being approved by ordinance, so there will be 2 readings. The agreement covers a lot of territory, some of it kind of legally technical. So I want you all to know that even if you are left with a few questions after this hearing, we get to come back in a couple of weeks and continue the discussion. And if you have further questions after this meeting, please communicate with Michelle and myself, and we will prepare answers for you at that time. So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite Tim and Lindsay to make any additional kind of comments you may have. You're not obligated to make any. And then we can have a discussion with the council about any questions and comments that you have.
Hello there, Tim.
Tim McGuire, 164 Railroad Ave. Mike, you've made a great presentation. I don't have any comments. I don't know if Lindsay does, or it would be best just to respond to questions from council. So Lindsay, I'll open it up to you if you have anything you want to add, or if we just want to respond to questions.
Nothing for me. I see that Munsey's on now. I don't know if he has anything to add. But nothing for me.
Muncie, please chime in if you've got anything you'd like to add.
Muncie has nothing to add, but happy to chime in if there are any questions that we need to address later on.
Honestly, that's the first time you've never had something to add since I've known you.
Well, in that case, Earl, I'll add that it's wonderful to hear your voice this evening.
Well, with that, again, there's a lot in this agreement, and between myself and Battle's team, we're happy to provide any clarifications, answer questions, take any comments that you may have on the document.
Before we get started, I just want a point of clarification. In the second, if it's approved in the second reading, we are still waiting for our due diligence to come through, and then there'll be a resolution that activates the agreement. Is that correct?
I don't know that, I mean, we could potentially do a resolution activating the document. I think the way that the settlement agreement is structured is that at closing, that kind of refers to the time at which Battle will convey certain tracts of property to the town, and the town will record these various ordinances and agreements in the public record and deem them to be operable. I don't know that we have to do a resolution implementing that. I think the act of closing is in and of itself enough. Yes, and thank you, Michelle. So Michelle brings up a good point. Really, the date upon which the documents become effective is the court issues an order dismissing the litigation between the town of Battle Mountain. That litigation has been stayed while we have been working through the settlement process. And again, once everything kind of comes together and Battle's ready to convey the property and we're ready to record the agreements and the ordinances, we'll file a motion, joint motion to dismiss that litigation. And when the court enters that order, we'll go and record everything.
Do we have a timeline for that, what we're shooting for?
The goal, I think, is to get to that point in June.
Yeah.
It's June, early July.
Tom?
So to clarify, we still could, barring any contentious issues, approve the ordinance tonight pending settlement agreement, which at that time it'll be retroactively in effect. Correct. Ernie?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of phrasing that. If you look at the ordinance itself, down at the very bottom, there's a paragraph in block letters that, to paraphrase, says the ordinance is effective for purposes of the town's charter timelines 30 days after publication. But the ordinance does not take effect and the agreement is not enforceable by either party until the settlement is implemented. And if for some reason the settlement were not implemented, we would, I guess, shred all these documents.
Other than the note of our glaring ignorance on modern water treatment practices, no, I don't have anything on the vested property piece. Plenty on the next iteration of the service plan.
Okay. Anything else on this question?
The only thing I had was under section 2.4 of the Malloy wetlands area. That's a parcel that we still have the option to purchase down the road for $1 in it.
That is correct.
That's all I had.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have any questions on this.
Okay.
Sorry, I guess one question on the AMI. Kind of where, how did we settle on that number? What was the thought process there?
Actually, I can answer that question. That came over to planning and zoning. Simple answer, 200% AMI is way off the charts. It is nowhere near what we were shooting for when it came to a calculation of AMI, particularly when it comes to deed restrictions, affordability, etc.
And Scott and Michelle, feel free to chime in, but Scott, our planner, looked around, I think, at other communities that were trying to acknowledge the financial cost of housing and what level you can actually make that housing available for. And I think 140% is where staff landed on that.
And I believe that's in conjunction with the recommendations by Kim Bell Williams. So we really wanted to stay in line with the rest of the county.
That makes sense.
We apparently went quite rogue originally, so this is an effort to correct that.
We priced the teachers and the firemen right out of the market.
Yes, we do.
By far.
Lynn, do you have any comments, questions?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Brian?
I'm glad to see us moving along on this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Lynn.
Brian?
Yeah, I just have a couple. First, the idea of, maybe this is more toward John, the idea of like general applicability, is that what a court would frame any, 20-year down the road ordinance or zoning change to determine who's, is that a violation of this agreement. You know, like I couldn't pretend to think like what we might be changing ordinance, you know, zoning wise in 20 years. So is that like kind of how they're going to, how someone would evaluate what's right and wrong or in the spirit of the agreement?
Well, I think there's two parts to your question. The first one is what kind of constitutes an ordinance of general applicability? So first of all, it applies not just to the Bolts Lake area, it applies to the entire town. Examples of that, again, updates to the building code. We recodify the zoning code and add some procedural related aspects to it. Another element that there's language in the agreement that allows us to do is if we have impact fees of general applicability, that is, they apply to the entirety of the town, they would also apply to the Bolts Lake area. An example of what that might be is if we developed a recreation master plan and began collecting money to implement that plan, that impact fee would apply across town, including to Bolts Lake. The second part of your question is it's more of what we're agreeing not to do. Even if it's of general applicability, if it has the effect of negating the rights under the zoning and subdivision ordinance that we passed a few weeks ago, to where we were taking away the rights of Battle Mountain to proceed with the development in accordance with that ordinance, that would be something that the court could say, whoa, you're violating the vested rights. Yes, it may be something of general applicability, but it has the effect of taking away what you promised to give to Battle Mountain for the vested rights period.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I think that makes me more comfortable with it. It's tough to think what a future council might be thinking about. So you always want to kind of protect what changes are out there. The other, just I guess, request maybe I have is, I know there's nobody there, but maybe somebody will be watching on TV or the recording. And I think it's important to state and clarify what exactly what the process from this kind of vested rights to an actual building would look like, and clarify that there's additional, obviously, like many steps that would need to happen and many approvals and many public hearings to kind of shape and feel what the final look or of anything or design of anything out there. So I think that's important to state, because I worry that if you're a bystander and coming in at pieces and parts of this, you might interpret it as we're giving Battle or a future whoever kind of rights to do whatever they want out there after this.
And that's a wonderful observation, Brian. And I guess just real quick, in case anybody watches this after tonight's meeting, you are correct. There is a significant amount of process left to go through, and events that have to occur. Probably the biggest one is you got to build a water treatment plant. This development has no right to tap into the town's water treatment plant, and until they have a water treatment plant that's functional and permitted, you can't build anything. So that would be the big construction milestone. And then for each of these exemption plat parcels, there's 14 of them, I believe 14.
Yeah, but we only own maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, because a number of them are coming to the town,
yeah.
or they are what are called restricted parcels, that like the CTP is a restricted parcel where we're not taking ownership of it, but it essentially doesn't have any development rights associated with it. So for purposes of the development parcels, future development parcels that are being created, Battle or their successors would have to come back to the town and go through a formal subdivision process, which would look at internal infrastructure, consistency with the zoning, need for parks. I mean, there's a number of things in the future that before they could build a single house, both would have to be approved by the town of Minturn, as well as some fairly sizable infrastructure improvements that would have to be made.
Just one follow-up.
Yeah.
Is there any? I didn't see it, but I may have missed it. There's nothing saying that like if Battle ushers in a new era of modern water treatment plants that the town couldn't also. Like, is there something preventing us from at one point partnering if that somehow makes sense for both entities?
There's nothing that prohibits the town from amending the agreement
Okay.
in the future if something worked for both parties to work together. It would require an amendment of the development agreement, but there's nothing that stops that from happening.
Thank you.
I'd like to get a better understanding of, who's paying for what as far as Molly Park Road. I know it's been my understanding that Battle Mountain School District would figure it out because we don't maintain that road. We didn't build it, as far as I recall. So are we now responsible for
Not yet.
getting that up to our code or what?
So, and I'll let Tim provide some additional context here. The one thing I would note is that when the town approved the ordinance whereby the town obtained the water treatment plant parcel,
Ordinance 3, Series 2011.
Michelle's very familiar with it. The town agreed to take ownership of Molloy Park Road upon certain benchmarks being met by the school district. And so eventually that road will come into town ownership, but it will be subject to improvements that will benefit both Battle Mountain and the school district. And we have not been involved in the discussions between those two entities, and I'll let Tim kind of describe what has happened.
Yeah, so Earl, to your question, I don't really think the town has any cost. I mean, it's really the users of the road who split the cost, so you know, if the school district had half the traffic and we had half the traffic, then we'd split the cost 50-50. Or any users who are on that road. If there was another entity on there and they had 2%, maybe they would contribute 2%. But as I understand it, the town would take ownership only after the road had been upgraded. And at that time, the town, you know, would agree to maintain and operate the road.
Yeah, as long as it's brought up to our specifications.
Right.
We take provision. I get that.
And we've had some really preliminary conversations with the district a while ago now. So we probably should re-engage them at some point, just to understand where their traffic is and what our traffic would be, and then we can discuss how we can cost share with them. So what typically would happen is we would probably try to get an agreement, and the town would oversee that agreement maybe, or somehow. I'm not really sure what role the town would play other than just understanding that.
We are kind of committing to coaxing both parties to reach an agreement that then could be put into like a subdivision improvement agreement or development agreement with the school district. But we don't really have a regulatory hook to force two potential benefiting parties to infrastructure upgrades to cost share with each other. And we're not going to be the bank for that project. I won't go into it, that there's a way we could build it and then impose fees on those two parties, but we're not financing that infrastructure. So it really is, we will do our best to make both parties see the benefit of coming together and sharing those costs and implementing an agreement at the time that they reach an understanding.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out, the projects aren't exactly on the same timeline. And so, you'd have to. I assume to reach an agreement, you'd have to kind of look at that and see, do you need to pony up before
Yeah.
you actually get some money?
Yeah, it'll be, yeah, we'll have to work together to,
Okay.
I know they're still trying to figure out, when they want to build it, how they want to phase it and so on, and same with us. So and there's probably milestones that are going to require upgrades to that road, so.
That road's in really bad shape, especially in the winter, and
Yep.
having all that extra impact without an agreement would not be a good thing.
Great.
Okay. That's all I got. Any other questions as far as the development agreement goes? Okay. I'll open this up for public hearing. Do we have any citizens out there that want to ask questions or express concerns?
There is nobody online.
Hey, I heard you.
I fixed it.
All right, close the hearing. And we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 5, series 2024, an ordinance approving the development and the vested property rights agreement implementing the Bulls Lake settlement agreement.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Eric, second by Gusty. Roll call, please.
Tom, Gusty, aye.
Yeah.
Eric, aye.
Brian, I.
Then I,
Okay, everybody said aye. Any nays? Okay. All right, we have an ordinance.
We have with first reading of that ordinance.
Yes, we have one more reading to go. Thank you. Okay, next is resolution 16, series 2024, resolution approving the Battle North Service Plan. Back to you, Mike.
So I want to acknowledge, we have with us from Battle Mountain, we have again, Tim. We have Trish Harris, who is with the law firm that has been retained by Battle Mountain to assist with district formation. We also have Bill Ankele, I think Ankley. Okay, I get that wrong all the time. You've seen Bill before. He's been here to present information about districts and to provide some context about what Battle Mountain's looking to do. Bill is one of the experts in metropolitan district laws in the state of Colorado, and has been very helpful in working with the town to at least prepare this draft. I would note that while this is a resolution that is not required to have 2 readings, it is staff's expectation that we'll take 2 council meetings to discuss this. And so at the end of the discussion today, we can, it's not really a public, no, it is a public hearing. It's a notice public hearing. We'll open the public hearing and would recommend continuing this to the next agenda for formal consideration. And that will just provide council, and to the degree any public decides they want to chime in on this will provide them with an opportunity to have 2 meetings in which to do that. Again, we've talked about the settlement agreement with Battle Mountain. That settlement agreement has a paragraph in it that talks about that we agree to allow Battle Mountain to come to the district, I'm sorry, to the town and request the formation of metropolitan districts. Metropolitan districts are a fairly widely used mechanism in the state of Colorado to do 2 things. One is to assist in the financing of public infrastructure associated with a development. And the other thing is that a metropolitan district can actually provide certain services, such as maintaining roads and water lines and things that take some financial pressure off of the town and transfer that more specifically to the property owners in Bolts Lake. We currently do not have any metropolitan districts in Minturn. I mean, there are a number in the valley, such as right around the corner, Eagle Vale is a metropolitan district. Berry Creek, Edwards, the Riverwalk area, that is a metropolitan district. The town of Gypsum, and those are all out, those three are in the unincorporated county, which is a little bit different because counties are not set up to provide kind of the same intensive level of services as a municipality. And so in order to meet the needs of property owners at certain areas in Eagle County, the county commissioners have allowed metropolitan districts to be formed both for purposes of financing infrastructure and providing services. The town of Gypsum actually uses metropolitan districts fairly frequently. I think there's 7 or 8 metropolitan districts within the jurisdictional boundaries of Gypsum, and apparently things are going pretty well with them. What I would note is that the town, whether to approve a metropolitan district is completely within the town's discretion under state law. There aren't really even standards, and Bill and Trish may correct me on that, but you know, if you just feel that this isn't right for Minturn, you don't have to approve it. Now that will have implications for the settlement agreement, but you have fairly wide discretion as a town council to approve or deny the formation of metropolitan districts. A metropolitan district, as Bill has explained in the past meetings with the council, it is a coordinate level of government in the state. They actually hold elections. They have governing boards. To be an elected member of the governing board is what's called an eligible elector. You have to own property within the district. You don't necessarily have to have Minturn as your primary residence, but the ownership of property entitles you to vote and to run for the Metropolitan District Board. And we've talked a little bit about in a previous meeting or two that, you know, there is the potential for creating kind of sub cultures or sub sets of interest within a community that has metropolitan districts, because the owners at Battle Mountain, the supplemental memo that you saw, I think yesterday, you know, they're going to be paying $600, $700, $800, $900 more a year in taxes than the rest of the members of town. And you know, that can create mentally a little bit of a shift in how you think about municipal governance. The districts will also be providing services within their boundaries that they don't provide elsewhere in town. Now the town generally does, but you have the potential for kind of a mindset where you could have one area thinking, well, we're really metropolitan district people as opposed to Minturn people. Again, in Gypsum, I don't think that has been a big problem. I can tell you the other municipality I represent, the town of Silt, we have a metropolitan district there. For a development, it seems to have fit well within the fabric of the community, but you know, these are considerations that you need to think through. We proposed potentially doing an ordinance on metropolitan districts last fall. We've not brought that back to you, but again, whatever we might include in an ordinance governing kind of the formation of metropolitan districts is a criteria you can impose without an ordinance, because again, it really is a discretionary act by the council. So if there are things that you are concerned about that you think need to be added or subtracted from the service plan that's included in the packet, those are things that we can talk through about and work through. And Whether or not it's acceptable to the landowner will be a different question, but you have the discretion to make those decisions. I would note that when we talked to you about the ordinance that we had drafted for silt, one of the criteria that we imposed was that if you're going to form a metropolitan district in silt, you got to be a certain size, a certain number of potential residents, and you have to provide some kind of extraordinary benefit to the community. There's got to be something bigger than just financing the curb and gutter going out to various cul-de-sacs within a subdivision to get a metropolitan district in silt. You've got to show something bigger. In silt, the metropolitan district is financing or has financed the installation of a needed roundabout in Highway 6. So, you know, thinking about what can this metropolitan district do not only for the landowner, but also for the community at large is a very valid consideration for you to make. Battle is proposing the formation of 4 metro districts. One of those metro districts is going to be what's called a finance district, and it will be controlled by Battle Mountain. The boundaries of that district will be a small parcel of land that is going to be down by the river. And the ownership, thereby dictating the eligible electors for that parcel, will be limited to people that are members of Battle or that Battle sells to. And that's because the financing district, it is going to issue debt to finance public improvements. And the landowner wants to know completely for sure that nobody can get elected to that board to destabilize that financing. The finance district will then have a series of agreements with Metro Districts 2, 3, and 4. And we'll let Bill and Tim and Trish kind of explain why there are 3 additional metropolitan districts. But essentially, there will be a commitment that the other 3 metropolitan districts will impose taxes to pay back the debt issued by the finance district. That's how the developer acting through the financing district can assure potential investors in bonds that there is a mechanism for repaying what is borrowed. The other 3 metropolitan districts, however, will be they'll have different geographic boundaries from each other. They'll be, as I understand it, separate from each other. And they will eventually have elected boards consisting of residents that buy lots in Battle Mountain or in Bolts Lake. I would note that one of the 4th metropolitan district is something that was added as we went back and forth with Battle Mountain's team, because we had a concern that that repayment of the bonds through taxes could make an additional hurdle to achieving affordable housing goals. And so a 4th metropolitan district concept was created that, as opposed to being able to limit or to impose taxes at 50 mills, that's the mill levy based upon the assessed value of the property, they would be limited to 35 mills, providing the affordable housing a reduction from what other areas in the Battle Mountain development, what they would pay. You will note that in the service plan, as I suspect you've had a chance to review, the district's powers in section 5 are enumerated. Generally, again, it's financing with the ability to provide certain services around road maintenance, park maintenance, landscaping, things that will make that a nice community and take a burden off of the town. The districts are precluded from operating and maintaining a water treatment plant. And that is something that staff has been very adamant about, that we trust ERWSD to do those functions appropriately. Smaller metro districts that don't have that experience could be less effective at that. And when things are less effective for savvy homeowners, they come with pitchforks into this room and create issues that we would rather proactively deal with in our agreements and approved documents. So they cannot maintain the water treatment plant. Additionally, the districts are prohibited from enforcing covenants, private covenants, such as HOA covenants. In some metropolitan districts, they act as a covenant enforcer, and because of their government status, there can be some advantages to that. But this council has in the past expressed some skepticism about having robust covenant enforcement, and so we nipped that in the bud. Financially, the service plans allow the districts to issue debt to a maximum amount of $62 million. There is on Exhibit B a list of the proposed public improvements that would be financed with metropolitan district money. Usually what happens is the metropolitan district has an agreement with the developer where the developer is the one who actually constructs the improvements. Metropolitan districts generally don't go out and contract for improvements to a road initially, or building sewer lines. Usually that's done through the developer. And then the developer has the right to receive a certain level of reimbursement from the metropolitan district. There are a few protections that we want to call out for owners within the development. The first one is, again, there's a debt cap. They can't go over 62 million in debt, and that's a lot of money. But if the developer ends up being, if the cost of public improvements is more than $62 million, the burden to shoulder whatever the remainder is falls to the developer. They can't go back without your approval, this council, and borrow more money. They're capped at 62 million. Second of all, mill levy caps, which this plays into what happens if things kind of go askew with the districts and the bondholders aren't necessarily getting paid. And the answer is that the maximum amount of taxes that can be imposed is the mill levy caps that are identified in the service plan. And that means that bondholders cannot come and demand that the additional taxes be levied against properties to ensure the repayment of bonds. They assume the risk that if there is a failure of value to repay their bonds, that's their problem. That is not the taxpayer's problem, up to the maximum, up to the 50 mils or 35 mil caps that are established in here. Finally, there is a debt limit in terms of the amount of time that it can be financed over of 30 years, kind of your standard 30-year mortgage. I have seen metropolitan districts with 40 years. I think I've heard of them with 50 years. All that does is allow a larger amount of debt to be spread out for a far too long period of time. So that provides yet another limitation for the benefit of future taxpayers within the district's boundaries. The debt that can be issued, there's a maximum cap that we're proposing of 15% interest. I mean, I guess that could happen. For the last decade, government issued debt has been in the 2 to 4% range. It's probably not gonna be there again for a while, but you know, we're probably looking at 5, 6, 7% interest rates on debt. And you know, that means more interest that has to be paid. But again, what that does is that squeezes the amount of money available to construct improvements. So it creates an incentive for the developer to try and time the bond market as best they can to get money so that they have more money in order to pay for the things they want to have built. There is this thing called developer debt. That's when the developer lends money to a metropolitan district, essentially for the construction of improvements. Before there are homeowners, there really is not any assessed value to repay bonds. And so developers frequently are required to front capital costs with a recovery agreement down the road. There's a statute, a state statute that limits developer debt to 400 basis points over what is general government obligation debt. That's 4%. And that the amount has to be found reasonable by what's called a municipal finance advisor that the district has to hire to evaluate the terms of developer debt issuance. Exhibit C is a finance plan. It's kind of loose because some of the specifics for how Battle Mountain will be implemented are not immediately known. And I will let Bill and Trish and others kind of talk through that finance plan and how it operates. I would, I guess, finally note that the service plan does allow districts 2, 3, and 4 to impose an operational mill levy of up to 20 mills. And that money cannot be used to repay debt, but it can be used to maintain, again, parks and roads and things within the district, pay for their auditor, pay for a directorate to the degree one's needed. So there is built into the service plan an ability to have operational funds available for the metropolitan districts in the future. I have learned a lot about metropolitan districts over the last few months. We have really some very credible resources available to provide additional information and then ask questions. So Trish or Bill would turn the time over to you to fill in any gaps that I haven't covered or provide additional information as you see fit.
That sounds great. I will start. And Mike, thank you so much for that summary. Really comprehensive. And it's been a really great opportunity to work through the comments and questions with you and staff as we've gone through this. As you know, we appeared before you a bit ago to give a background on metro districts in Colorado, and in particular to introduce the metro district concept with respect to Battle Mountain, Battle North. And this is a follow-on to that. We did present it at the work session, a draft of a service plan, which we have made revisions to based on comments that were received subsequent to that work session. And that is in your packet. That includes those comments that were put into the service plan. I'd like to say that just as a point of departure, metro districts are primarily a financing tool to help support projects that are approved by governments within the state of Colorado for development, whether it be a city or a county. Where necessary, metro districts have the ability to operate and maintain facilities, but typically metro districts will build facilities and turn them over to other governmental entities that are already in existence for the purposes of ongoing operations. But the idea behind a service plan is to create a bundle of financial resource that can be used to help pay for public infrastructure that is ultimately approved by the town or required by the town to be built in order for the project to proceed. So it's a resource that stands ready to deliver benefit to the project, to help support the project, and help the project succeed. And it really, the degree to which the metro districts will execute their powers in a service plan is ultimately going to be dependent upon approvals that will occur in the future by the town specific to particular development areas. So it's always good to kind of set the table with respect to what the function of these metropolitan districts in Colorado are. They're not intended to supplant the role of any other government. They're not intended to conflict with the town of Minturn. We carefully draft our service plans with the help of your staff to ensure that doesn't happen. And so what we have done is to present a service plan that from the outset was drafted with best practices in the industry in mind. There's no new art here, with the possible exception of the affordable housing district, which came about after the first set of comments. But if you were to look at service plans around the state and compare those to what you have in your packet, you're not going to see material differences. They all have, over the years, come to a common set of limitations, authorizations, particularly financial limitations. And you'll see, if you were to make comparisons with other service plans, you would see this service plan is in the mainstream with respect to what is being done in Colorado today. I do have a brief PowerPoint that I'd like to go through to, since we have a public hearing and for the benefit of the members of the public that might not have been part of the work session, I think it'd be good to just run through some of the basics relative to the metro districts. And then after that, we can have a dialogue, answer questions to the extent you have them. So I'm going to give it a shot at sharing my screen. And you can let me know if you're able to see it. Are you able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can, Bill.
Okay, I'm not as good at hiding these slides on the side, so I'm going to leave them in place. Hopefully this is big enough on your screen you can see it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Are we good?
Well, we're going to minimize your face so that all your slides are visible.
Oh, well, that's probably an improvement in the process. So,
all right, good to go.
All right. So as Mike has indicated, we are proposing 4 districts based on some language that was in the settlement agreement. We have 2 residential districts, a commercial district, and an operating district. Just a little bit of explanation as to why they set out this way. It's always ideal to separate residential from commercial development because there are different assessed values that apply to residential versus commercial development. And the same mill levy in a residential area would hit the commercial 3 or more times as hard. And so it is common practice within the state to divide your commercial areas from your residential areas, which is what we provided for here. We started with just 1 residential district and a commercial district. But now in response to comments we received with concerns over property tax levels in those portions of the residential areas that would be devoted to affordable housing, we provided for a 4th district to specifically accommodate and only accommodate the affordable housing property. So we have 2 residential districts in that regard. The other is an operating district. It's common when you have a multiple district structure like this, and these are very common within the state, by the way. It's common to have an operating district that is the lead agency that acts on behalf of all 3 districts, so you're not dealing with a multi-headed animal. We will marry the districts together with intergovernmental agreements so that their activities are coordinated, since this proposal is being presented as a combined proposal for financing the project. So we have an operating district that takes care of administrative matters, coordinates the financing, deals with the town or any other governmental entity, and the like. Oops, sorry. There we are. As noted, districts will provide financing for essential public infrastructure, roads, water, sanitation, storm drainage, open space, parks, trails, the typical suite of infrastructure that you see with projects of this sort in Colorado. In addition to that, as I noted, the districts do have the authority to operate and maintain some improvements. The districts would be operating open space and maintaining open space areas, community parks and trails that would be built for the project. They'll also have dominion over the restricted parcels so that we can assure compliance with requirements that apply to those parcels. We won't.
Those are real quick, Bill, those are the environmental challenged parcels. So the idea is that the metropolitan districts would provide a vehicle for ensuring compliance with environmental requirements.
Correct. Thank you. As noted, the water system is anticipated to be operated by Eagle River Water and Sand. We have a variety of limitations here. First, the boundaries of the metro districts are defined in the service plan. There are initial boundaries that are established to have a home for the districts to exist at the beginning. And then we have an inclusion area, which defines the balance of the project, which as the project develops, those territories would be eligible for inclusion in the appropriate metro district, whether it be residential, affordable housing, or commercial. We've limited the number of powers. There are a broad range of powers under the Special District Act, but we wanted to isolate those that were most important for this project. They're listed there. One thing that was noted as a limitation was restriction on covenant enforcement for private covenants, HOA created covenants and the like. One exception to that we think we need to have here is with respect to the restricted parcels, because there are covenants associated with those, and there will be more to be established per the settlement agreement. And in keeping with the important role of the metro districts to oversee compliance in those areas, we think we need to have that limited amount of covenant enforcement authority. As noted, all public improvements are subject to the town subdivision improvement process. So you're going to get to look at all of the improvements that will ultimately be built or paid for by the metro districts as part of your development review process. We don't have any authority to enforce zoning or create zoning or do design review. That's all left to the town, and we'll be complying with those requirements. One of the other limitations is the town may occasionally go out for grants. Metro districts as public entities also have the ability to compete for those grants. It's common, and it's included in this service plan, that we would not compete with the town for those opportunities. Continuing with restrictions and limitations, Mike alluded to the cap on debt authorization. It's based on the project cost plus a cushion for the passage of time and other contingencies. So that the maximum debt authorization is 62 million for this project. There's also, these are, by the way, these are the most important financial restrictions that you'll see in almost any service plan out there. You're going to see a cap on debt authorization. You'll see a cap on the debt service tax levy, which in this case, as Mike has indicated, is proposed to be 50 mils for all the districts, with the exception of the affordable housing district, and that district would be a 35 mil debt service tax levy. There's also a cap on the operations levy. Initially, as drafted, the service plan did not have a cap on the operations levy, but in discussions with staff, that's been installed as a maximum of 20 mils. Mike also mentioned that it's typical in the early stages of a metro district's life to need to rely on the developer for financing of the cost of public improvements. And so the developer will, in the normal course, go out, build the improvements, incur the cost for those improvements, and then ask the district to be reimbursed for those improvements. And any debt and occasionally that reimbursement obligation is in the form of a debt instrument. And when that happens, there needs to be something called an external financial advisor certificate. This is something that has been part of the legacy of metro districts for quite a while, but it was statutorily codified by the legislature last session, where in order to ensure fairness in the terms of debt that is issued to a developer, and in particular with respect to the interest rate, the legislature has installed a standard by which interest rates are to be determined for debt that is issued to a developer. And that requires an external financial advisor to certify compliance with that with the statutory limits on what that interest rate can be. And those external advisors certificates also typically opine as to the reasonableness of the rest of the terms of that transaction. That's a very important limitation, and I want to shine a light on that. We can't exercise the condemnation power without town approval, so we won't be competing or creating issues associated with condemnation without your approval. There is an intergovernmental agreement that is always attached to these service plans that deals with enforcement rights on the part of the town. By statute, the approving entity, the entity rather that approves the service plan, has the ability to seek an injunction against the Metropolitan District to restrict the Metropolitan District from going outside the limits that are in the service plan. But in addition to that, we create these intergovernmental agreements between the districts and the town to provide contractual remedies for the town to enforce compliance, just to have another suite of remedies available. And this includes specific enforcement of obligations that are included, or limitations that are included in the service plan. I mentioned initial boundaries and then inclusion area boundaries. This is the gray area represents the inclusion area boundaries. The initial boundaries of the districts are located, I don't know if you can see it up in, no, you probably can't. In the northern part, I don't know if my cursor is over the top of it, but there are some initial boundaries that are simply placeholders, as I mentioned, for the future use of the project. And then this gray area represents the various property areas that could be included within one of the 4 districts. Outside of that, we can't go unless we come back to the town and get approval from the council. There were some questions raised at the last work session and subsequent thereto concerning infrastructure estimates. These are preliminary estimates. They're necessarily preliminary because at the time that metro districts are proposed, you don't have, approved development plans. Typically, you've got a conceptual plan for the future number of units. And from that, you can project water and sewer and roads and other infrastructure that is going to be necessary in order to build the number of units that are allowed in the project. So the specific infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, that will be financed by the metro districts will be subject to future approvals by the town. So the town will have the say in that process. Estimates are based on today's costs. There are contingencies and escalators included in that. Again, final costs will be based on what it costs to build these improvements at the time they're actually underway. It was noted that the developer is, metro districts never typically have the ability to finance 100% of the public infrastructure required for a project. within the limits of the mill levy caps and such. And so the developer is always responsible for providing any supplemental financing for that. And as noted, the developer will initially front end these costs, and then when the districts have enough assessed value and the public markets are willing to buy bonds of the Metro District, then the Metro District can go out to the marketplace and secure financing and reimbursement that way. There was also some question about some specific improvements that are thought to be needed for this project, and there's a listing of those here. Tim McGuire is in the room, and he is intimately familiar with the planning that has been done relative to public improvements for this area. But you can see these are significant, extraordinary improvements of general public benefit to the area. Improvements to Malloy Park Road, the intersection at Highway 24. We've got sidewalks, potential transportation bus stop, pedestrian bike paths, parks and other recreation areas that would tie into the rec center and the Malloy recreation areas. There are opportunities from time to time for Metro Districts to partner with other public entities in regard to recreational activities in particular, and that often takes the form in terms of collaborative arrangements with school districts. So we just note that here. The restricted parcels, the EPA parcels with EPA issues. One of the important functions for the Metro Districts here, and this would be the operating district, would be to, through a transparent and accountable way, handle the oversight of the restricted parcels, which would include restrictive covenants, compliance with restrictive covenants, maintaining signage and fencing, interaction with the EPA and CDPHE, annual reporting requirements. There are fees associated with oversight. Metro District can handle those. Coordination with CBS and Viacom, as well as Eagle River Water and Sand, and the town. But the unique opportunity here for Metro Districts is that you have a public entity which is fully transparent and fully accountable in terms of handling these kinds of obligations.
And it is not the town.
And it is not the town, correct. Just an overview of the key financial terms in the service plan. I mentioned total estimated cost of roughly 51 million. There's your debt, the combined debt limit of 62 million. That is a shared debt limit among all 4 districts. And then we have our maximum debt service mill levies for districts numbers 1 through 3, which is at the 50 mills. And district number 4, you see here as 35 mills. You should note that the service plan and all service plans allow for an adjustment to this debt service mill levy to the extent that there's a radical adjustment in the method of calculating assessed value by class of property. And we've seen a fair amount of that in the last few years. This allows the Metro Districts to preserve what was originally expected in terms of property tax revenues based on the assessed value regime that was in place at the time the Metro Districts were organized. It doesn't allow for an increase in property taxes over what would otherwise have been realized, but only to maintain the status quo.
Can I interrupt you for a second? District 4, are they going to be subject to these possible increases as well, like from the operational district?
Yes. Well, the Metro District, district number 4 has 35 mills in debt service cap that could be adjusted to just preserve the status quo, not to increase taxes, but just to preserve what was expected at the time that the districts were organized. And then it would be also subject to an operation maintenance levy of not to exceed 20 mills. And that's important because, the affordable housing units will benefit from all of these improvements just as the others do. And so what we tried to do here is first provide some recognition of the fact that affordable housing units need to have a little relief when it comes to property taxes relative to the standard fare. So we've done that on the debt service side, taking it from 50 mils originally proposed to 35 mils. But we do have them liable for the same, operations levy as the other districts are, on the theory that everyone benefits similarly to the improvements. So we try to give them a haircut on the debt service side. Maximum debt mill levy imposition term, as Mike indicated, 30 years. We often see 40, but this is narrowed down somewhat. The districts do have the authority to impose fees for services that are provided. There aren't any specific fees proposed right now. If there were some irrigation or landscaping maintenance or some other type of fee that wasn't otherwise funded through property taxes, the metro districts would have the ability to impose a fee for that. But the law on this subject is the fee has to be reasonably related to the cost of providing the service. So there are guardrails on that. There is a financing plan attached to the service plan that was prepared by D.A. Davidson. On the Zoom here, masquerading as William P. Ankley Jr. is actually Lacey Knowles. I sent her my link for the meeting here, and meet Lacey Knowles from D.A. Davidson. If there are questions that we get into on the financing plan, she can help us out. But we have two bond issues that are proposed. One in 2026. It takes a little while to get these districts off the ground. In an approximate amount of 36 million. And then we show in 2036 a projected refinance of that 2026 issuance, and approximately 24 million in additional funding. So the financing plan, which is based on development assumptions that are tied to what is entitled for this project, shows the ability to finance and pay for, under the assumptions presented, this amount of debt. The other thing I want to mention in regard to the issuance of debt is that when we do go out to the marketplace to issue bonds, the service plan requires that bond counsel issue an opinion as part of the transaction that the terms of the transaction meet the requirements of the service plan. So we have an additional check and balance, and because bond counsel is not going to issue that opinion if they're not satisfied as to the veracity of what it is that they're opining towards. Additionally, as part of a bond issue, there is always a market study that needs to be done. One of the questions raised was, well, what if the development assumptions don't pan out? What if there's a slowdown in development? What happens? Well, the first thing that happens is the 50 mil cap comes into play and puts that risk on the bondholders. But the bondholders, knowing that they take that risk, coming in, they want to make sure that the chances of them being left holding the bag are virtually none. So we have to, in order for bond counsel to issue its opinion that the bonds are valid obligations, tax exempt valid obligations, there needs to be a market study that demonstrates that the debt that is being proposed to be issued can be repaid based on reasonable market assumptions that are validated by the market study within the term of their issuance. So whatever the length of years, whatever the interest rate, so on and so forth. So there are some pretty good market-based constraints on the behavior of metro districts in terms of issuing debt. And I just wanted to make sure that council was familiar with that, since financing, as I mentioned, is the primary goal of these metro districts. I think that is the end of my PowerPoint, and maybe I will stop my share unless you want to keep it up. It's up to you, Mike.
I just want to add that the town has worked for some time now with a municipal finance consultant named Jim Mann. And you've seen Jim before on water rate discussions. We had Jim prepare comments on the draft service plan. And the memo that you received yesterday really is in response to various comments that Jim had provided us with to give to Battle Mountain. And Jim had some family obligations for tonight. But if there were financing questions from the town standpoint that you wanted to have answered, we probably can get Jim at the next meeting. Yeah.
So that concludes my PowerPoint. As noted, Trish Harris is present in the room to facilitate Q&A on this, and as well as Tim in regard to questions concerning development related specifics. So happy to answer questions and have whatever discussion you'd like to have.
Okay, I'd like to go down the line and we'll always go back around again if you want to have a question ready. Tom?
Actually, the question would be, so this 15 April memorandum response to your inputs, Mike, is that something you're prepared to provide a response or rebuttal to these now, or is this?
I probably am not the best sounding board for that. Again, we do have Lacey Knowles, who has worked on the finance plan or prepared the finance plan. She could answer questions. And again, if you have a series of questions we need to follow up on, we can have Jim Mann participate in the next council meeting.
My only question is right now, a clarification, rebuttal on what we have. 29 pages, 20-something questions that seem to disagree.
And again, recognizing that those came out later than the packet, another reason why we wanted to provide you with 2 meetings to discuss. But again, I would say if you have some specific questions for the Battle North, we do have their team online, and then we can follow up with our consultant as appropriate.
Nope, I will wait for the response to these. Good.
Okay. Gusty?
I think you guys answered it, but I was a little confused on your bond assumptions. It showed series 2026 and then it showed series 2036 and then it showed 35 million and then 58 million and a total of 94. But it has 62 million cap. But I think Bill answered it that was a refinance, but it didn't look that way on your chart because it showed a total of both. So it was kind of confusing on that.
Yeah, that second issuance in 2036, like Bill said, that's kind of a blend of refi of what was issued in 2026 and then some additional new money. But again, that's still all subject to that $62 million.
Okay. That's really all I had. Thanks.
Okay.
As far as I guess my main confusion was the map of the district zones, which makes no sense to me right now. And I assume later when we know where things are going, you add, or is the idea to cluster them together? So over here is number 1, or I guess 1's kind of the other thing, number 2, and then 3, and then over there is 4.
I mean, it really depends on how the development plan plays out. So where, the commercial properties are going to be located, those will go into, District 2 or whatever our commercial district is. The non-affordable housing properties will go into District 3 or whichever one that is. And then any affordable housing will go into District 4. So the boundaries of the districts don't have to be contiguous. So we could have, some of District 2 here, some of District 2 over here. So it's really dependent on how the development plan progresses. So we have the flexibility to then include property into the appropriate district as development progresses.
When do you contemplate I live next door to Gusty and he's in District 4 and I'm in District 3? Or is it more this neighborhood is District 4 and this neighborhood is District 3 kind of thing?
And I would look to Tim as
Or
far as
maybe
like
we don't
the
know yet.
affordable housing. I don't know
Fine,
if we know yet if those are gonna be clustered in one particular area or not.
Yeah, for the most part, a residential district would be all one district, but if your house was affordable and Gusty's wasn't, your lot might only be in that affordable district. And then a lot down the street that's also affordable might be in that
Okay.
district. But as Tricia said, if all the affordables in one neighborhood, it would just be that one neighborhood.
Makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, just general question on when you guys start to form the boards of these districts. Is there any consideration to include a member of Minturn, either town or staff or anybody to just be kind of part of that conversation? There's, good neighbor policy in that regard.
I mean, we haven't really discussed that. In order to be eligible to be on the board, as Mike had mentioned, you have to be an eligible elector. And in the early stages of development, before we have actual, John and Mary homeowner that are out there, the statute does allow us to qualify folks as eligible electors under purchase and sale agreements with the current property owner. So if any person from the town, town council, who I probably wouldn't want town council, but maybe, I don't know, whoever, you'd have to be qualified under those purchase and sale agreements. And so that would be an agreement between that individual and the current property owner, which would be Battle North. But we haven't, that hasn't come up as a question yet, but
Yeah, I would say it's atypical to do that because metro districts are public entities and their boards of directors are just like y'all. Their meetings are open to the public, and any member of the public, including any member of the town council or town staff, can attend. We've had good experience over the years with councils identifying somebody on their staff, if not a council member, to come and attend those meetings. So we can certainly explore, what the best option there would be.
Yeah, I think it'd just be good for us to be well informed and just, again, being good neighbors, so we can work together.
and districts have to post notice of all of their meetings at least 24 hours in advance, and that's typically done on the district's website. So once the districts are formed, then we'll get a website established, and those meeting notices would be on the website for anybody, any member of the public.
You're over 50, you don't want to use traditional.
I'm sorry.
What was that?
I think she hit her microphone. It's a mistake. It was Lacey. Oh, okay.
So, and Trish, maybe you can answer this. The initial appointment of directors will be nominated by the developer land group or some consortium of them and a successor. And do they then get approved by the district court? How does that initial board get seated?
Yeah, good question. That initial board gets seated through the organizational election that the district holds. So once the service plan is approved, then we go to the Eagle County District Court and ask the court to approve or order an election to organize the district. And so then that election would be held. The next time we can do that is in November of this year. And that's when we would also do our, all of our debt limit questions and taxing questions as well. Would get approved at that same election.
I'm mainly trying to understand, affordable housing is extremely difficult to have in this valley. So I'm trying to just kind of do some rough notes on whether this setup is going to really allow for affordability or not. So the 35 mill levy on, just to keep the math simple, I will say, okay, the 50 mil is going to end up being $1,000 a month. And the operation is going to be 20 mils, so that's going to be $200 on top of that. There was a water district tied to the 50 mils.
No, the water district would be a completely separate you know,
That's
whatever.
Another mill levy?
Well, that's a,
Well,
that's a good question.
fee.
a fee.
Yeah, they would,
That'd be your water bill.
That'd be your water bill.
because although I'm guessing you're gonna have to include into ERWSD or.
They can do a kind of, I'm assuming that they have the ability to supply water, and yeah, an extraterritorial agreement. That, you know, they would say, yes, we're going to supply water through your system that you're going to build, that we're going to own and operate, or operate and maintain. Our district needs to own it.
So that'll be expensive too. Okay.
To clarify a little bit though, you know, our districts would be the ones that would be financing the construction of that water system within our districts. So that would be within our districts, that would be under that debt service
So there
mill
wouldn't,
levy.
so the district, they have a mill levy for their infrastructure where applicable. It wouldn't be applicable because we would have financed the water plant with our mill levy.
In the pipes
And the pipes and everything, right? So we would only be subject on the water side to your water bill, your water fee for running the plant. So we wouldn't be subject to another mill.
So who pays for the water plant?
This metro district would pay for the water plant within that 50 mil cap or the 35 mil cap.
Within the 50 mil cap.
Yes.
Okay, that's,
But you're saying those people would not be additionally assessed, whatever.
Not a
your
separate
USD
mill,
is. Okay.
because we're not,
Yeah, that
we're
makes
not
sense.
financing infrastructure for Vail or their bigger system.
okay. That's a relief. Okay, so that would be fine, you know, basic, yeah. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you. Lynn, do you have anything? Lynn, are you there? Let's go on to Brian. Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'll try to phrase this as a question. In general, it seems, in general, the town would rather have the metro district mill levy burden be as low as possible on those citizens that are in the town. At least that's my interpretation of it, right? Like you've got, I worry about creating this subsection of town that's like more heavily tax burdened than the other sections of town. And then, you know, 315 to 345 residents, which is a large number compared to our recent voter turnout, you know, all decide to vote as a block against tax questions. I mean, you see in like Gypsum is the only municipality locally, and they have a lot of metro districts apparently. They're also the only ones that voted down the regional transportation tax question, for instance, from the last election or 2 elections ago. And I see that we've got a mill levy cap for the debt service, but what are the motivations for the developers to keep that mill levy burden down on this project? I mean, is there any, or is it let's just max these things out and build, and you know, the rich people who want a $4 million home also want a high metro district cost in order to keep their neighborhood affluent, or something like that. I mean, I'm worried about trying to find out, like, what are the motivations to keep this tax burden down overall on that potential development out there.
Well, I think the overall goal in structuring a metro district proposal is to build a series of limits, outer boundaries, both in terms of the total amount of debt that can be financed, also in terms of the property taxes that can be used to pay that debt. And the typical approach is within the guardrails that have been established, the metro districts act to most efficiently finance that portion of the improvements that they can afford to finance at that mill levy. And the more you lower that mill levy, the less you can finance through tax exempt bonds, and the more the developer comes out of pocket and the more pressure you have on home prices as a result. So there's some competing some competing interests there, but property owners that buy into a metro district have a lot of disclosure as to what their obligations will be. And the legislature has spent a lot of time over the last couple of years making sure that there's chapter and verse given to those folks. I think the idea is metro district financing is better financing, cheaper financing, and therefore, as long as we have reasonable, and these are reasonable in terms of Colorado in general, this 50 mil cap is the common cap for debt service mill levy. It'll probably be less than that as it plays out, because when you go to issue bonds to the marketplace, as I said earlier, they're going to hold the bag for anything that can't be paid above the maximum mill levy, and they don't like being on the short end of that, and so they usually require some sort of a haircut, make sure that they're protected, so the amount they're willing to loan is less, and therefore you've got somewhat less pressure on mill levy as a result. And I see
It did see that there are a lot of financial controls, and I really appreciate you kind of outlining those ones around the debt issuance. But what about the 20 mil ongoing maintenance and operations?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And sometimes we see limits we actually have a limit in this one at 20 mils. I usually argue that can be short-sighted, because you need to be able to meet your administrative and statutory responsibilities imposed by the legislature, and reporting and budget and audits and all of those things. But if you happen to have improvements that are needing operations, maintenance, parks, open space, trails, what have you, the last thing you want to do is shortchange your metro district from being able to properly maintain those. That being said, the 20 mil cap was an effort to try to constrain that amount, and we could certainly look at some adjustment.
And another factor there is that unlike the debt mill levy, which there will be a contract that says you agree to impose up to this amount, the operational mill levy is subject to change by an elected board. So if the elected board of the affordable housing district was like, you know what, we can forego the petunias and I don't know, whatever else that they could save money on, they don't have to impose 20 mils, they could impose 10 mils.
And two other things on the operation side, again, the finances are public. So the town will be able to see, this is what it's cost to the roads and take care of the park and so on. So there's not, it's available there. And the other thing, Brian, on the financing side, the town is going to see subdivision plans that have engineered cost estimates for, the roadways and the infrastructure. And the town is going to review those plans. So, we can't have gold-plated sewer things and other things in here. The town's going to have a say in that, and we'll have some oversight in that.
Muncy, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do. And with apologies for sort of interrupting, I wanted to back up a little bit on discussion about, which I don't remember if it was Earl or Brian or someone, about the mill levy and the inclusion into the district boundaries of the water district. Under our reservoir agreement with them, which is the agreement where they acquired the site for the reservoir and made the commitments on water service and such. None of that's contingent on the property, Battle Mountain property, being included into the boundaries of the water district and made subject to their mill levies. But there is some consideration there that because they have also an O&M mill levy and so forth. And so they have operational costs to take on what they'll be doing here. And so if the property is included, it would be subject to the mill levy. If the property is not included, their rates for water service charges will be potentially higher to the consumers. And so there'll be, as that evolves, it could go one way or the other. It could the property could remain outside of their taxing authority and have a somewhat less of a mill levy burden, or depending on what the out of area water rate kicker is, they could be subject, if they're not in the district, to higher usage charges at the consumer level. So as we sit here tonight, I think it would be, for purposes of clarity, important to understand that that could go either way.
Thank you, Muncie. Any questions for Muncie on that? Okay, thank you.
Try, well, maybe Brian has more comments and then we should go back to Glenn.
Yeah, Brian, do you have anything else you want to address? Any more comments?
Yeah, I just had a clarification on what Kate had on the non-contiguous boundaries. The service or the development agreement had some mixed use areas, and how do these metro districts work in the case of, you know, a mixed use multi-level building with residential, commercial, etc.?
Yeah, we can divide our boundaries in the air based on condominium, you know, the maps or legal descriptions as the case may be. We do that routinely. We often have developments where you have a main floor of, you know, retail, and then above that maybe you have condos or something else. So we define our district boundaries consistent with that use, and we have the ability to do it. Boundaries don't have to be contiguous.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Oh, one other thing. Now, accessory dwelling units, you know, there's no plan to have affordable housing as an accessory dwelling unit to a homeowner who wanted to do one.
I mean, it may be that within the free market area, the non-affordable housing area, that there may be ADUs that get rented. Yeah. But under your affordable housing code section, they have to be primary units.
Okay, just sure. Okay, so if there's no other questions from anyone from the board, I will open this up to the public hearing. Wait, this is a resolution.
It is actually a notice of public hearing. As odd as that sounds, the resolution is the vehicle that implements, but we did notice this is a public hearing.
Okay, so I'll open this up for public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience there, Jay?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, well, they can still raise their hands as we continue on. And of course, this is going to be at least 2 meetings long anyway, so. So if there's no other discussion, I guess we can.
Yeah, so I want to make sure, you know, your staff has a couple weeks time now to get additional information. Maybe we can talk after the meeting about to make sure we're getting things for you pertinent to your questions. But if anyone has any specific information that you're like, gosh, I really wish, you know, we had some information or, you know, whatever about the topic, let us know. And even if it happens after the fact, you can email Michelle and Michelle can pass that on to me and we'll work on gathering that. But if you've got, again, any topics, we want to be responsive to
I don't have any exceptional items. I just don't want to waste man hours doing a redundancy. So there's nothing specific to me as opposed to the normal process of the rebuttal from your all side under the timeline that is acceptable for your staff action.
And it sounds like you would benefit from having Jim Mann participate from our side to provide kind of a financial perspective.
Whether he participates in the next meeting or he is primarily responding to most of this that applies, doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I think it'd be a good idea to have Jim Mann available.
He can zoom in, so it's less burdensome on him. And as was noted, the action item on this will be to continue the public hearing to May 1st.
And with that, we'll take a motion on that. Motion to continue.
I'll make a motion to continue the resolution for series 2024. Resolution of the town council, of town of Minturn, Colorado, approving consolidated service plan for Battle North Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 4.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Tom and a second by Gusty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? All right. We will continue at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take a recess.
Yeah,
right
that's a
now.
great idea.
I forgot my cat.
I got the bladder of 3-year-old girls right there.
Just kidding.
If you could physically see Earl put a foot in his mouth.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back from recess. And we're on to ordinance number 6, an ordinance amending the nuisance code relating to wildlife.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this has been an ordinance sometime in the coming. I will keep this very centered to the entire town, as this is an ordinance that will have implications for the entire town. But throughout the last many years, we have continued to have scenarios where wildlife are impacted for a variety of different reasons that pertain to human causes, yet wildlife is not specifically identified in the nuisance code as being
Something we can prosecute.
something we can prosecute. How's that for forward? Thanks, Mike. So Mike, having been fully attentive to the issues of Battle Mountain and Belden, I have, through, as council knows, council has retained the services of Rob Marsh to help with other town matters. So this is something that we have been wanting to address so that in the event future nuisance issues occur that affect wildlife, we can, as Mike identified, actively prosecute those cases with a very strong case in court. So with that, I'd love to turn this over to Rob Marsh. I don't know if you've all had the pleasure of meeting Rob Marsh. So Rob is with the firm Jester, Gibson and Moore. They have been supporting Minturn and Mike's efforts with the initially with the Battle Mountain litigation. When Battle Mountain litigation turned to Battle Mountain settlement efforts, Mike really took over on that front. But with Mike focusing on settlement issues with both Battle and Belden, Rob fortunately was able to help Minturn facilitate many of our additional legal needs kind of in this interim time. So with that, I would just love to say it's an absolute pleasure to work with Rob. He's here tonight and talk to you about the changes that he is proposing in the nuisance code to kind of beef things up. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. To the council, I think this is a relatively straightforward amendment. This first ordinance is something that would work in concert with the next one on the agenda that we'll talk about in a few minutes. but the basics of this is an amendment to the definition of what is defined as a public nuisance in code section 7210. The amendments do two things, or three. One, they clarify that a nuisance can be identified in any section of the code as opposed to just chapter 7, article 2. Second, they add a couple of words, welfare, and morals to the definitions of a nuisance. That is just to harmonize this section of the code with nuisance law generally, and to ensure that the town has the ability to enforce the nuisance code to the full extent permitted by case law in general. And then, as Michelle mentioned, to add a few words about wildlife to make clear the connection between risks to wildlife and risks to human health, and that either one of those are prosecutable under the nuisance code. So those are the basic amendments here, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions for Rob from the board? Rob, I've got one. So you just explained that anything that is lawfully violated, we don't have to come up with details of possible instances where wildlife would be endangered and put it into this ordinance. It'll apply to whatever we add now, we have on our books now, or whatever we add later.
Correct. A different council at any particular time could identify specific nuisances. What this does is just identify anything that creates a, quote, demonstrable risk to injury or death of wildlife. So it requires something more than a hypothetical concern. But those concerns can be identified and specified in the future as necessary.
So if, for example, when the Forest Service shuts down the trails in the winter due to elk habitat, we could add that. Well, that's not on our books because it's a Forest Service thing, right? So we would need to add that to our books as far as someone hiking on a Forest Service trail that was closed in the wintertime. Would that be considered under the nuisance?
Probably not under the language of the current ordinance, unless there was some reason to believe that that individual person or something they were doing was going to create a demonstrable problem. So, I mean, if you had backcountry camping and fires and those kinds of things, that may fall under this general language, but just an individual's presence, I don't think would create that demonstrable risk of injury or death.
And we probably have a jurisdictional issue on federal land, but as an example, the mini mile, which is predominantly on town land, if someone were to just flagrantly violate that closure, because we also close that trail and go around and around and around, we warn them, and the elk are scattering, and the wildlife officer is very concerned about it, we could potentially prosecute that, because that's an action that the town has the ability to regulate.
Well, CBW has made it clear to us that just the elk having to get up and move is limiting their ability to survive the winter. So, okay, excellent. That's all I have.
Brian or Lynn?
I'm sorry,
Brian or Lynn?
Brian?
Nothing here.
Nope.
Okay. With that, guess we can go ahead and open up to the public. Got it, Jay?
There's nobody with their hand raised.
Okay, this is first reading anyway, so they can come back next time. Close the public hearing.
Actually, I do have one question. Is wildlife too general of a term to be using, or does that open up I guess we would be the ones that would be chasing down any prosecution, but people could interpret chipmunks and bees and, you know, I don't know, insects.
So Brian, my thought on that immediately would be exactly that the prosecutorial discretion exercised by the town is all the check you would need on that. So my recommendation would be to leave it broad so that those decisions can be made on an as-needed basis by the council and the town attorney.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the board as far as questions, we can go to a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 620, series 2024, an ordinance of the town of Minturn, Colorado, amending chapter 7, article 2 of the Minturn Municipal Code to prohibit nuisances which harm wildlife.
8 seconds.
Motion by Eric, second by Kate. Roll call, please.
Tom, I.
Dusty, I.
Eric,
Earl, I.
Brian, I.
Then I, oh,
Okay. Ordinance number 6, first reading is approved. Next, we have ordinance number 7, series 2024, first reading, and an ordinance amending the fence code.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as Rob indicated, these two ordinances really go hand in hand to further strengthen our ability to prosecute issues that arise from nuisances to wildlife or nuisances to humans or wildlife caused by fences. So with that, Rob has done a great deal of work on this front, and I'll let him take it from there.
Yeah, so here, council, we have another very basic amendment to the code, this time Title 10, Article 8, Section 280. As it currently exists, this section of the code prohibits barbed wire fencing within the town and certain other types of improvements that are deemed dangerous. The amendments do a couple of things. One, they clarify that either fencing or other kinds of improvements that create these sorts of risks to wildlife are prohibited, not just barbed wire. And they clarify that allowing a fence that is violative of the ordinance to remain in place is itself a violation of the ordinance, as opposed to prior language, which could have been read as just saying, if you build it as an initial matter, or if you alter it in some way, that is the violation, as opposed to the existence of the fence by itself. So again, as Michelle mentioned, this works in concert with the prior ordinance to expand and solidify the town's ability to enforce the code to protect wildlife as necessary.
Anyone need any clarifications, any questions?
So just to reconfirm. The cemetery moose incident. Pre-existing fences. That meet these definitions would have to be retrofitted,
Pre-existing fences are not exempt.
but yes, the answer is yes. Got it.
Gonna ask the same question, so.
Good answer.
I think all your good stuff, sorry.
No problem.
Anyone else from council have any questions, concerns? Open it up for public hearing.
sorry, quick question.
I'm sure, go ahead.
In terms of like fence construction and design, does our code specify like if it's a pointed wood fence or pointed metal fence or anything specific, or is it just kind of any dangerous fence?
Actually, I can take the first part of that. I can say that our section 16 of the Minturn Municipal Code identifies fence construction. However, we would want, and you'll see in, I believe, one of the whereases of the ordinance, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has an entire brochure. Actually, it's a pamphlet on wildlife friendly fencing itself. And I believe we would want to stick with that as much as we could in order to stay true to limiting impacts to wildlife as they may try to jump over it or crawl under it, as I've learned. I would acknowledge in my non-educated assessment, a wooden fence may not be as impactful as a metal fence with points, but I don't have extensive knowledge in that area. Rob, do you want to add to that in a more astute and legal way?
So the amendment doesn't change the type of fencing that is prohibited. So we're not expanding that. And what it talks about is barbed wire, sharpened nails, or any other pointed or sharpened thing or metallic substance. So it could be wooden, it could be metal, it could be plastic. And the issue would be, again, this demonstrable risk. So there is that threshold that I think will mitigate, the burden on property owners of compliance. There is, of course, the prosecutorial discretion here as well about what is a problem or what maybe isn't a problem. And Michelle is quite right that there are extensive materials available generally about fence design to avoid risks and harm to wildlife. So I don't believe that there will be any measurable burden on property owners of compliance, and certainly none that should be substantially beyond the existing terms of the code.
Should we be considering providing this kind of information from CPW as part of our building code?
If you build a fence, doesn't it already get reviewed?
I don't believe that individual, and I'm speaking without anyone from the planning department here. So let's keep that in mind, but I don't believe that individual fences in town, fence applications in town are reviewed by Colorado Department of Parks and Wildlife. If that's the question.
They just put it for permit, that's reviewed.
But like, PNC reviews it, right?
Depends on the situation, but at minimum, it's going through a permitting process.
Right, so
there's-
some of it's administrative at the planning administrative level with staff.
Right.
And certain other situations require going to planning commission, but in almost all cases, staff reviews it. I
Right,
want to
so
see if
it's
it's under
like-
4 feet, I think, and a few other things, it might not get reviewed.
Yeah.
At which case, hopefully healthy wildlife could jump over it.
And you presented something that was like insanely unsafe. it would
Right.
Probably get it permitted by the town, I would think.
Well, and this will help us back that up.
Any other questions? Okay, open up public hearing. Jay,
Oh, sir, there's nobody in the audience with their hand up.
thank you. Close the public hearing. Anything further? Ryan, you got anything?
Rob
Nope.
O'Brien, yes.
Lynn?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 7, series 2024. An ordinance of the town of Minturn amending chapter 10, article 8 of the Minturn Municipal Code to revise the section prohibiting certain fencing in town.
Second.
Yeah, ordinance 7. Okay, we got a motion by Gusty, second by Tom, roll call.
Gusty, aye.
Yeah.
Eric, I.
Early.
Brian, I.
Then I,
All right. Next we have ordinance 8, series 2024, first reading, an ordinance amending chapter 8 of the Minturn Municipal Code for civil infractions.
Yes, I just want to take a quick moment to make sure that you all know Cindy Krieg. So Cindy wears far too many hats for me to list tonight, but you don't see her very often in the council room capacity, which I think is odd given how much she does for the town of Minturn. But tonight Cindy is here wearing her court clerk hat. So with that, we'll turn it over to Cindy.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. So this amendment aims to address concern regarding the increased misuse of jury trial requests by defendants and their attorneys for traffic citations and other misdemeanor municipal court offenses, as well as to proactively address the limited capacity of our court staff being me, to execute a jury trial. Staff has discussed the proposed changes with the Eagle County Sheriff's Office, with our municipal judge, with our prosecutor. And based on that input, we have then brought on the legal expertise of Rob, who you just heard from, to help us through this process. And I will certainly let Rob go into any more legal detail, but I'm happy to answer any general questions if you have any general questions about this ordinance.
Anyone from the board have any questions on this? And then one of the main issues was you had asked for a jury and no one would show up.
Well, we actually, so we haven't had to try to execute one in a while, but what is commonplace or becoming more commonplace these days is for defendants and or their attorneys to request jury trials for these minor cases in the hopes that they know or they believe it won't be worth the court's time and they hope to get their case dismissed. So, yes.
So this is basically just saying
Just
violation is not a crime.
I'm gonna let Rob go into that more.
Just summarize like in one
How we're
sentence.
defining it, yes.
Correct. The existing language of the code says that it is not intended to result in criminal violations. The significance of that word crime or criminal being the constitutional entitlement to a jury trial and other procedures that are addressed in municipal court rules. So what we're doing here is three basic amendments. One to the definition of misdemeanor to clarify that it's not a crime. One to address the procedures that will apply in Minturns Municipal Court to clarify that there won't be a jury trial unless it is mandatory under other applicable state law or the Constitution. And one to speak directly to the interpretation of the traffic code, the model traffic code as adopted by Minturn, to specify again that a traffic ticket is not a crime for which you have a jury trial. It's expected that that piece will effectively eliminate the issue in Minturn's courts where the majority of the issues are traffic infractions.
So if a infraction happens in town that is not a misdemeanor, but say a felony,
We don't have any.
that goes to county court. Yes, okay.
That's the worst small fries on this. This is just an attempt to reduce absurd requests that are wasting everybody's time. That's it. In a nutshell.
Yes, and we don't have time to waste. Okay, so let me open this up for public hearing. Jay,
No, sir, there's nobody with their hand up.
do you want to raise your hand?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
close the public hearing. That will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 8, series 2024, an ordinance of the town of Minturn, Colorado, clarifying that violations of its municipal code are civil infractions.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kate, second by Gusty, roll call.
Tom, I.
Gusty, aye.
Eric, Earl, I.
Brian, I.
Lynn, I.
Thank you. Ordinance number 8, first reading has passed. And we have no discussion or direction items.
Not tonight.
Excellent. So we're down to future agenda items. Is there anything that councilman would like to see as a future agenda item?
It's fairly robust.
Yeah.
Actually, if I can just make note that we have already added to the May 1st agenda.
Oh, good.
Minturn, we have a very small staff and we work with quite a few consultants. And staff is working around the clock to try to get water rate discussions before this board as requested. And that will include the outdoor irrigation and sprinkler rates, which hopefully will come before you on May 1st because Jim Mann is not available on May 15th. So that is looking to be added. Additionally, because Jim Mann is not available May 15th, the Downtown Development Authority discussion, which has been pending the review of the financial analysis for the downtown, is now close to ready, and we are hoping to have that discussion May 1st as well, which is essentially a reprisal of that discussion from about 9 months ago, where we said we would go get a financial analysis of what a downtown development authority would do. We'll bring that back to you all to determine if you still want to continue moving forward with the concept of creating a downtown authority. So we will have those two discussions to add to it, which I expect to be rather robust.
Is the irrigation different than the tiered residential?
Very.
Okay.
I am in the middle of learning science. And we will have a representative from Eagle County and the Colorado State University Extension Office joining us that night to talk about the science that's involved in understanding water precipitation, ground dryness, and how those play into factors that create the amount of water we need to water certain square footage areas. So one thing that might be happening, I'll be providing an update, but we may be bumping somewhere on here, and I can't see it right now. Somewhere on here is the historic preservation ordinances for 151 and 155 Main Street. Those were recommended, so we had a very good historic preservation commission meeting last night. They're doing a great job with as few nominations. So those two hearings might get bumped to June in order to allow for these other things which are quite pressing time-wise.
Good with me. Right.
Free snacks.
Can we add, we had the email from Sarah from Eagle Valley Childcare. If we could get her in for her presentation, that'd be awesome. I get that question from friends and community members all the time. What's going on over at Pooh Corner?
June 5th might be a great opportunity to bring her in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, if that's all for the agenda items, by golly, got one more item left.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Let's see, now who got that one first? Gusty? I'll give it to Gusty, you know. The next one's there.
I took all the stuff, so I guess that's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're done.